Microdosing magic mushrooms had enhanced my ability to stay present in the here and now among a whole host of other benefits that I was able to tangibly notice. It had gotten me to the point where I felt like I could manage on my own, and that's exactly what ended up happening. I was able to manage on my own and more than thrive on my own. But about 3 weeks ago, I started microdosing again, and this time it was with a substance that I had never tried before. As you know, there are a number of myths floating around about LSD, and I didn't know what I didn't know. There was also a part of me that thought, why fix what isn't broken? If LSD and psilocybin mushrooms are two of the most popular substances for microdosing, and I'd already had such a positive experience with one of them, why experiment with a more stigmatized substance? But as I started learning more about that substance, I became more and more curious about trying it for myself. For instance, did you know that the person who first synthesized LSD called it medicine for the soul? This was Albert Hofmann. Albert Hofmann lived to the age of 102, and he was a regular user of LSD in small doses. Did you also know that if it hadn't been for a breakthrough that he had had on an acid trip, Nobel Prize winner Francis Crick might never have discovered DNA? Steve Jobs himself was reportedly a psychonaut, so who knows? Maybe if it hadn't been for LSD, we might never have had the personal computer as we know it today. So I'm 3 weeks into microdosing LSD now, and I feel like I'm at a point now where I can make this video and can talk about the differences between microdosing psilocybin mushrooms and microdosing LSD. Let's begin with the basic differences between LSD and magic mushrooms. The first obvious difference is the form that it comes in. Magic mushrooms come from the ground, whereas LSD comes from a lab. There's also a naturally occurring version of LSD that comes from fungi that apparently grow in certain regions after an unusually wet season. But from what I've read, that fungi is apparently really rare. And so for the most part, the better known version of LSD is the synthetic version. The second obvious difference between the two drugs is the history behind them. Magic mushrooms have been used by civilizations for thousands of years, whereas LSD is a more modern invention. A standard dose of magic mushrooms is 1 to 2.5 grams, whereas a standard dose of LSD ranges from 50 to 150 micrograms. And there are 1 million micrograms in a gram. A microdose is about 1/10 of a standard dose. So this means that a microdose of magic mushrooms ranges from 100 milligrams to 250 milligrams. Whereas for LSD, a microdose ranges from 5 to 15 micrograms. Two other obvious differences between the two substances are onset and duration. For magic mushrooms, you can start to feel its effects within 30 minutes to an hour of ingestion, whereas for LSD, you can expect to feel its effects within 20 minutes. The primary effects of magic mushrooms last between 4 and 6 hours, while the primary effects of LSD last between 10 and 12 hours. A standard mushroom trip is often said to come in waves, whereas a standard LSD trip peaks at around 2 hours in and declines to half of the peak experience approximately 1 to 2 hours later. So you can use your imagination to fill in the gaps when I say that a microdose is approximately 1/10 of a standard dose. What about the difference in experience between the two substances? On magic mushrooms, I feel more introspective. I feel like I'm more open to perspectives that I normally wouldn't consider, and there's more of a sense of reverence that comes with the feeling of being one with my surroundings. Magic mushrooms help me feel more connected to my body. They provide more of a grounding bodily sensation, which I believe is what makes magic mushrooms such a great tool for use in meditation. On LSD, I feel more extrospective. I feel more energized and creative, whereas magic mushrooms make me feel more grounded and at peace. LSD makes me want to go out and do things and write things, create things, and sometimes even talk to people, which is a big deal because I consider myself an introvert. LSD fills me with stimulating clarity, whereas magic mushrooms fill me with a grounding sense of peace. A microdose of LSD seems like it was designed to enhance my worldly endeavors, whereas a microdose of psilocybin helps me get anchored to the core of my being. Hopefully that made sense. Now, which is better? Of course, there's no way to answer this question because we're comparing apples to oranges in some ways. In the long run, psychedelic compounds are psychedelic compounds, and that means you can expect to gain the shared benefits of neuroplasticity, neurogenesis, and a reduction of activity in the default mode network of the brain, which enables ego death. All psychedelics in the long run can enhance your creativity, spirituality, and overall mental health. But in acute cases, there are tangible differences between various different psychedelic psychedelic substances. I want to frame this bit of the video in the way that I would offer advice to a friend. So take my 2 cents for what it's worth. If you're planning to microdose for mental health or pain management reasons, I would recommend starting with magic mushrooms. If you're depressed, chronically anxious, or are generally on a lower vibrational setting, magic mushrooms can help lift you out of your negative mood state. This doesn't mean that magic mushrooms are an instant happy pill. If anything, they can be better understood as therapy pills. Anybody who's been to therapy will tell you that therapy can be hard work. The work of healing yourself doesn't always leave you feeling like $1,000,000 in the immediate aftermath. Therapy can be hard, but you can trust that it is certainly good for you. The more you can trust and surrender to the process, the smoother the experience will go. And the same goes for magic mushrooms. If you fight it, it won't go smoothly for you. Knowing now what I didn't know then, would I have still started with microdosing magic mushrooms?